so much sprawl. It's almost like a suburban sprawl or something. Hey everyone, Sir Dux Lancelot here. I've had more of a chance to kind of go through what I like and dislike about Civ 7, so I'm going to share that with you now. Also, a lot of this knowledge comes from having watched Boestheus's and Ursa Ryan's reactions. They've actually played the game, so a lot of my current understanding of Civ 7 comes from their feedback that they provided in their reactions. So make sure you go and watch those if you haven't already. And then a little bit about myself that will probably be relevant for how I interpret a lot of what we're seeing so far with Civ 7. I like always trying to cut down how many turns it takes to win the game. For example, with Civ 6, once I beat Deity difficulty, I would try to say win in 200 turns or 195 or 190 and keep trying to shave that down as low as possible, sort of just competing against myself rather than against the AI. And so that bias that I have, or that preference, is gonna come through here in my reaction. Also, all these screenshots here that I'm showing are from the official Civ 7 gameplay showcase. And if you enjoy the content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, let's start with graphics. Overall, I really like the graphics. They're beautiful. I mean, I'm going to show a few screenshots here that I really like, such as this one. I love the colors. I love the vibrancy of everything, the detail. I love the terrain. Like in this screenshot, you can just see the texture of the terrain. And I like how they're kind of moving away from the cartoonish graphics of Civ 6. Also, they seem to be giving a lot of attention to the unique civs and their own artistic style. Like for example, these warriors here, I mean, just amazing detail. I think the units also seem to stand out more against the map here in Civ 7 versus Civ 6. When I would do like thumbnails or take screenshots of units, like zooming in on a specific unit for Civ 6, it would always kind of blend in with the map, but these stand out really well. That said, I do kind of worry that maybe things are a little too cluttered on the map. For example, in this screenshot, there's so much sprawl. It's almost like a suburban sprawl or something. There's not really a focus of view in some of these screenshots. I'm a little worried, if I'm looking for a building in a certain district, I'm kind of worried that I'll get lost trying to find it. Back in Civ 6, you had different colors associated with each district, so you could kind of glance and tell what each district was. But this definitely seems different. I just worry that it's a little too cluttered and busy. I wish maybe city centers kind of stood out more, like maybe they were just bigger looking, even if that's not realistic. I wish they were just represented as bigger and then sort of proportion everything accordingly. Like maybe those urbanized districts sort of are half the size of that, and then on down to the rural districts. Here's another example. Like I can't really tell what the city center is at first glance. I mean, I know it's going to have the banner over it, so it's not really going to matter. I could just look at the banner, but it'd be nice to kind of see visually what the city center is a little clearer. And then those other two or three districts around it, it's just at first glance, you can't really differentiate them, I feel like. But I want to emphasize that I do really overall like the graphics. Like I'm going to put up here another one of my favorite screenshots. I mean, just beautiful. Beautiful. I just wish they would kind of like reproportion some things. Okay, now that we're on the topic of graphics, I guess I'll discuss the UI here really quickly. I think a lot of the other content creators who actually played the game emphasize this, that they don't like the UI, and I don't like it either. I don't like the gray, like the words don't really stand out. The font, I feel like, doesn't really stand out very well. I wish it had more of like a traditional or classical look for some reason. And then I don't like this screen either. I think Bose really emphasized this, but yeah, it's just the two characters looking at each other. You've got these big drapes behind them, and then you've got like this kind of like cluttered action in the middle. I don't know. I hope they revamp this. I really wish the UI looked like the cover art that they made. I love that cover art. I was hoping the UI would be like that. Here's another screenshot of the UI that I just don't really like. Lots of gray. It seems so metallic and sort of futuristic when most of the game is much more like classical and historical. Let's talk about some of the era changes. So in Civ 7, there will be only 3 eras: Antiquity, Exploration, and Modern. I do like that idea as a whole. I like the idea of kind of streamlining the eras, having fewer of them, and then making them more meaningful. With each era, the design, the layout of the cities will change, like the way the buildings look and everything. I think that's pretty cool. Also, you'll have to pick a new civ for every era. So there's like a pool of civs that only apply to the Antiquity era. There's a pool that only applies to the Exploration era, and then same for the Modern era. I like that. That's a pretty cool idea. And then you just play as the same leader throughout. Kind of allows you to mix and match different abilities. I think this is promising. I have heard that this comes from Humankind, sort of, or is sort of copied from Humankind. I never played Humankind, so I don't really know, but that is a little disappointing to me if it was copied, I guess. But overall, I do like that idea. I think being able to mix and match civs and leaders will really enhance the replayability of Civ 7. Also, you can play pretty historically with this. So let's say you wanted to model the evolution of England through time. You could say start as Rome, because England was a Roman colony, go on to say England in the Age of Exploration, and so forth. Another interesting thing related to the eras is how you can have like one district in one era and then kind of build on top of that with another district in another era. I think that's pretty cool. One really big change that I'm not so sure about is that there's a different tech tree for each era, and apparently civs that have been lagging behind in the prior era get all those old techs for free when the era flips. That I can't say I'm a fan of. I'm curious, what I'm worried about is, will there be a big enough gap between leading players and lagging players to make optimal gameplay meaningful from era to era? I have heard there are like future techs and future civics for each of those tech trees, so maybe that can kind of establish some kind of a differentiation between optimal gameplay and suboptimal gameplay, but I'm just not sure. I guess time will tell. For example, this here that we're looking at is probably an Age of Exploration tech tree, so it starts with machinery, astronomy, cartography. Those lagging players in the ancient era, or the Antiquity age, they're going to be all caught up as soon as this era starts in terms of techs. I just wonder what that means for optimization and stuff like that. Also, I can't imagine what kind of an impact this is going to have on multiplayer. That is a totally different question. I do enjoy multiplayer somewhat myself, so it'll be kind of disappointing if this makes multiplayer less competitive. Now that we're on the tech tree, I do want to mention one thing that I really like, and that's these mastery techs. So say below cartography, there's a mastery tech, and it's like a dead-end tech that enhances cartography in some way. I really like that because that opens up such an interesting strategic divergence. So you either go along the main path, get to the end, and later stuff faster, or do you really focus on one thing and make it better and maybe have an earlier impact with that tech? Really cool idea. At the end of each era, there's going to be a crisis, and that's going to force you to choose a crisis policy. And these are like negatives. They're not good, but the whole goal is to pick the thing that's the least bad. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, in Civ 6, we're used to playing with policy cards, choosing the best policy cards. Why not kind of flip that and make us focus on choosing the least worst? And that's what this does here. Also, you'll be able to level up your leader through these different trees. Like there's cultural, diplomatic, economic, expansionist, militaristic, and scientific. And I think there's a tree for each. And I think that's kind of an interesting idea, but there's so many, like, it looks like there's just so many different abilities and options here that I do worry a bit about balance. Like the more options you add, the more likely there could be one or two that are just overpowered, and that would kind of negate the choice. Like if one or two of these options is always the best way to go, then there's really no choice. It's just an illusion. I do worry a little bit about that, but I think it has potential. Also, I'm not sure if I have a screenshot of it, but apparently there's a screen where it shows the development toward the next era. It's kind of a point system, and then I think at a certain level you can build certain wonders like the Great Library or something like that. I like that idea. I kind of like the idea of some wonders being unlinked from the tech or civic trees, kind of like a reward for doing a certain number of things. You get to build this wonder or do something else. So I like that. But it kind of goes back to the whole everybody moving forward to the next era at the same time. I'm not so sure about that. But eras overall, I think there are some things I like and there are some things I'm not so sure about. I think splitting the game into 3 parts and making each of those parts playable, that will really help for a lot of new players who haven't actually finished a full game. So I think that can be good. We'll just see how it's executed. Now let's discuss a really big change. No more builders. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed with that, but some of that may just be like my own bias. Maybe I'm just not being creative enough or open-minded enough to the potential. So we'll see. But what I loved about builders was they're kind of the secret thing to invest in Civ 6 to get ahead. Like at first glance, they maybe seem like a waste, but putting production into builders almost always pays off. So when you remove that, I just worry, I wonder if there's going to be other little secret things you can learn to kind of fill that void. And then also with the builders, there's no more chopping as well, like harvesting resources and features and stuff for immediate production and food. So that's a very big change also. It's too bad because like chopping or clearing land it has always been, a part of human history, even back to the ancient times. So it's a little sad that that's gone. When you put a district down, it just goes right on top of whatever features are there, from my understanding at least. Again, I hope that there's something else strategic to take the place of that. So in this screenshot here, like we can see there's the plantation there to the left of the city center. And it's just placed down. It's not built by a builder, which is kind of weird. But again, I want to be open-minded here. Just because they're changing something really fundamental about the game like this, I don't want to just write it off. And then another big change, it kind of seems like they're doing away with citizens working tiles. I'm not completely clear on how extensive that is, but my current understanding is that you basically get all the yields of all the tiles in your border, which makes me wonder what the point of population is. I don't know, it just raises a bunch of different questions. What I loved was micromanaging tiles, so I can't say that I'm a fan of doing away with this. Again, I want to be open-minded, but this is something I really have trouble seeing the potential in. I don't know, part of me feels like they're kind of trying to like simplify the game too much and take away decision making, take away autonomy, kind of just write a script that you follow along, but I hope I'm wrong. Also, there are some really big changes regarding cities. Civ 7 will have cities and towns can specialize and they can convert into cities. Towns, you don't really have control of what they build. They just provide yields to your capital or to your cities. I may not mind this so much. I feel like it does kind of take away the decision making if you can't choose what to produce in those towns, but it seems like there could be a lot of strategy with choosing how many towns you have as compared to cities. There's probably quite a bit there that could be interesting. So I'm hopeful on this change. You can also have towns that specialize in certain things. And if you make extra cities, then all the yields from your towns are kind of spread out more and maybe less impactful. Also, apparently you can gold buy in your towns. You just can't choose what they produce. Or maybe they don't produce anything, I'm not completely sure. Which kind of leads me to another question. I'm curious how the value of gold will be compared to the value of production. Because currently in Civ 6, it's like a 4-to-1 ratio. So 4 gold equals 1 production. When you pull up the build screen, it'll take 4 times as much gold to buy something as it takes production to build it. I'm curious if that ratio is going to be the same, or is it going to be 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or something like that. We'll see. But yeah, I do see some potential with the towns and cities thing. Also, apparently there are no more specialized districts like theater square, campus, commercial hub, and so forth. It's just kind of like a generic district that holds 2 buildings of your choice. And then those buildings give you adjacency. It just makes districts seem kind of generic to me. And I wonder, like, am I going to be able to find the buildings that I'm looking for when I'm looking at the map? Also, I assume this means there's no more district discounting. That was always kind of a fun mechanic to do, try to trigger a chain of district discounts, 40% off in Civ 6. You could kind of use that discount chain to guide you as to what district to build next. Apparently, there will be urban and rural districts. I'm not totally clear on what that means. I think maybe the rural districts are like the old improvements in Civ 6, but I'm not completely sure. I do kind of like that differentiation. That I think that has some potential. So even if there aren't specialized districts, at least there are two different kinds of districts. Also, my understanding is that districts culture bomb the tiles around them. And then I guess since citizens don't work tiles anymore, but you just get all the yields in your borders, that kind of gives you more yields. I have a lot of questions about that. Like, is there a limit to how many districts you can put down? Or is there going to be like some type of scarcity related to districts? Or is it just going to be unlimited and you just put as many districts down as you want? You get all the yields you want. Hopefully not. Probably not. I'm going to assume not. Just a lot of questions with that. Also, apparently there are kind of like settlement caps, or at least there's a penalty that kicks in once you settle beyond your cap. A lot of questions here with this. Like the question, like how big is the penalty? Is it so severe that it effectively does truly cap you at that certain number of settlements? I don't know, a lot of questions here with this. We'll see how it goes. I mean, even in Civ 6, there kind of was this penalty with amenities. I could understand maybe if it wasn't severe enough, so I can understand going a bit further. I hope it doesn't force players into a box, because obviously it's going to be best to reach that limit. Assuming there's no penalties, it's going to be best to settle that maximum number. And if it automatically is out of the question settling beyond that, that's sort of forcing everybody into making the same number of settlers, at least to play optimally. I hope there's some variation that's available. Another misunderstanding that a lot of single player players have is the assumption that settling more cities always was better, regardless of amenities in Civ 6. And if you look at competitive multiplayer, that's just not the case. There really was a decision there as to settling more cities and suffering on amenities versus fewer cities and having better amenities. Usually the best players went with the second choice, actually. Well, I should say the best players could go with either choice. I know, like in my own games, we would have some competitive CPL players, and one player may have only 8 cities and really good stats, and the other one has like 20 or 30 cities and a lot of empire-wide production, and maybe at the end of the game they can build up a huge military, but it wasn't predetermined that the wide player with all the cities always won. Sometimes they did. Sometimes the player with only 8 cities had enough stats to get that victory condition quickly. Even in Civ 6, there are those two choices. It's not like everybody just builds as many cities as they can. So it's a little unfortunate that there's this misunderstanding, especially among single-player players, that more cities is just always better in Civ 6, because it's not exactly the case. Sometimes it is, but not always. I just hope they don't go too far in the opposite direction and truly impose a cap. Otherwise, it's going to reduce variation of play, and I fear it could really just make one play style viable. Let's discuss some of the combat changes, because these I'm really excited about. So the big change seems to be commanders. You can kind of pile all your units into the same tile as your commander, move them to the battlefield, and then spread them out again. I watched an interview with Ed Beach, and he was saying they like where the combat is in Civ 6 overall, except for moving the units to the battlefield. And I agree with that. I think this is going to be a good change. Streamlining that movement. I always hate when you have like 10 different units to move. You're not moving them to fight or anything like that. You're just moving them to the borders, maybe 5 or 10 tiles away, and that is very tedious. So I think being able to collapse them into a commander and then move them that way, I do like that idea. And then also the promotions aren't on units, they're to the commander. I think this is a good idea probably too. We'll see how it goes, but I think that's pretty good. Now there is one hesitation I have regarding the combat, and that relates to the tech trees being associated with each era or each age. One of my favorite things in Civ 6 was rushing a certain unit and then getting an advantage maybe over another player, whether it's the AI or a human, who maybe has similar science as me but didn't use that same tech path to get to that special unit. and then being able to overwhelm them in war. Okay, usually this is with the AI. I don't think I've overwhelmed anybody with war in multiplayer, at least not many, but you get the idea. But anyway, with all the different tech trees, I'm a little worried, like, is that gonna be gone? I can see how you can kind of rush to a specific unit for that particular tech tree, but if that tech tree resets, like everybody resets to have the same number of techs each era, then that advantage isn't gonna last very long. They're gonna be able to catch up pretty easily. So that is my one hesitation with combat. Another combat change I may like is how strategic resources, or the lack thereof, don't really prevent you from building certain units, but they do enhance your units. And I think they impact your production toward those units. I think this could be good. I think that's probably a good change. It sounds like the trade system is also going to be changing, which I do like. I think you can take merchants. You can basically choose to send a merchant to a particular city of someone else's, and then get like extra bonuses from them based on how well developed that city is. I think this is cool. It's going to encourage players to build up certain cities for their allies to be able to send merchants to, and then they're both going to mutually benefit. I think that's great. Now let's kind of go through a few miscellaneous items. I haven't seen much or really anything about religion in Civ 7. I'm not sure if that means it's not gonna, there won't be any religions or what, but I would probably be okay with that. I think in Civ 6, religion was just too overpowered, especially with monumentality. Holy sites first was often like the best play. Getting away from that, I think, will be good. Also, I really wasn't a fan of the religious victory and how you have to move all those units around, and they don't really like advance through time as combat units do. So I'm glad if that's all going to be gone. Apparently there are going to be Civ-specific culture trees, which I think is an interesting idea as well. Economic victory is being added. I like that idea. Resources apparently won't be differentiated as bonus, luxury, strategic so much. I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. I'm kind of curious to see how that goes. Apparently there's like a new influence system for like denouncing. You have to have a certain number of influence points and different things like that. I don't know. I just wish they would kind of simplify the AI diplomacy. In Civ 6, I really didn't like the way it worked and the way the trading, you could exploit the AI and basically take all their gold in certain cases. I just wish they would just simplify that. Also, wonders are going to be linked to certain civs. So, like, Rome is going to have an extra boost toward building Colosseum, and each civ is sort of going to be linked to a wonder. It's not like they're the only ones who can build it, but they get extra production toward it. I think that's a good idea, kind of historical precedent. And finally, last but not least, as we can see in this screenshot here, boats will be able to navigate some rivers. And I think that's an interesting idea. It's gonna make, I feel like it's gonna make naval units a lot more important, so we'll see how that goes. But I do like that idea, how they're navigable. Now, I think these river tiles are actually tiles themselves. They're not just the borders around the tiles like in Civ 6. They're actually the tiles themselves, which I think is fine. I just hope that they retain some like combat modifiers as they do in Civ 6. Like if you attack across a river in Civ 6, it's you have like a negative modifier. I'm not sure how that's going to work with the idea of attacking across no longer really existing, since you're either attacking into a river tile or you're on the river tile itself. I just hope there's some kind of terrain. I hope terrain continues to play a big role in warfare. And maybe it does. Hopefully so. One more thing to mention, there have been some changes regarding city-states, or I guess now they're called independents. I just watched Potato McWhiskey's reaction. He also played the game. His came out a little later than the others. I watched part of it at least. And it sounds like you can choose from a number of different city-state or independent suzerain bonuses. This is interesting, but I am a little worried about like giving too much control on that, because then it sort of removes strategic reactions that players have. So like there is a lot of randomness currently in Civ 6 to city states, which city states are in the game and so forth. It sort of forces a strategic choice often with players. Like if you meet this really good city state, do you put Amani in there early to become suzerain and get its ability, or do you do another governor? If you allow the player to have complete control over what bonuses the city states have, I almost fear that could sort of lead to just like a single play style being optimal. I don't know the whole extent, but it does sound like city states or independents are going to have more power and maybe play more of a role, so I think that is cool. Okay, those are my thoughts on what we know so far about Civ 7. Personally, I think there's still a huge range of my possible reactions to the game, so I could see myself loving it or being pretty disappointed by it. So at this point, it's just too early for me to say, but I am definitely very excited about it. I'm sure I didn't cover everything, so let me know if there's anything I missed. Let me know your thoughts. What do you like or dislike about Civ 7 that we've seen? And